Okay, we are recording again, started the recording over again. So what I'll do with the video is I post it to YouTube and then I send you the link for it so that you have it and can view it whenever you'd like and as often as you'd like. So I don't know where we left off when you couldn't hear me, but we talked about, sorry, we talked about setting this to fit. Where's my, this has been moved a little bit. We talked about the larger size hearts. That was intentional, right? And we talked about additional wood pieces if you want those. Let me get rid of all my excess supplies now. They're now clogging the works. I have to have it clear for the music boxes. And we talked about music boxes if you want them, correct?
Yes. I do have a question on his halo or whatever. So you said the hearts. What is the green? Hard
So
to tell.
you can use any kind of greenery that you want. Here, will you show me the original one?
Yes.
So do you know what green florist tape is? Okay. So when I made this, he's glued in, so I can't really pull him out. But when I made this little halo, let me put him up close, I just chose ivy, but you can choose any kind of bush or anything with a lot of leaves on it. And you'll just pluck those off. In the case of my ivy bush, it was just kind of a short little stem with ivy leaves on the end. And I plucked that off the stem and clipped it a little bit. And then I just took that florist tape and kind of wound those stems around the wire. So the wire, you're going to make a double loop of wire that sticks up like that and goes around in a circle and then twist it back together to make like a stem. So it'll look like a circle. I guess I can't. I guess I need two hands. The wire will look like a circle with a small stem coming out of it like that. And then around on the circle part, then you'll take that green forest tape and wire in some little leaves all around there and just lay them over each other as you go around the circle. So you got this halo of greenery. And you can use whatever kind you want. And then I just glued in these little hearts, except I've always liked them, but you just can't really see them very well. So this time I ordered bigger ones so that you, as you randomly, tuck those underneath the leaves and glue those in, they'll show up a little bit more. Does that make sense? Okay. And I don't know if you're able to find craft twinkles. It's very hard to find them, but you can really use any kind of clear glitter or any kind of pink glitter because it goes over the hearts, anything that you'd like, but it just gives it just a little bit more bling if you want to use that. Any other questions before we actually start? Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, so the brushes that I like to use, I want to talk about, we're going to do a lot of stippling and dry brushing, and this is just a matter of preference. You use what you've learned to love and like, but what has worked best for me is to use something with a domed tip. I really like these. When I first painted this project, I was totally in love with these from Low Cornell, but they don't make them anymore. These are round fabric dye brushes, but do you see the similarity? They have kind of a stiff bristle, has a little bit of bounce, and they have a domed appearance, And if you look at them this way, they're round, and this way they're domed. The reason why I like using these kinds of things when I stipple and dry brush is that when you hit on the surface, I'm going to show you from the side angle, if you're painting on a surface like this, you have not all of the bristles hitting at the same time. And you'll have the bristles that are the highest that land first, and then as you apply pressure, the bristles that are on the outside edge hit, and they eventually splay out, and so you get kind of a lighter, more airy look with your stenciling, stippling, dry brushing. So that's just my preference, but I know that you're experienced painters, and so you use the thing that you love the most, and that will work. I've got all my little pieces up here. So the first color that we're going to start with is bubblegum pink. As soon as I find it. Where's my bubblegum pink? Where'd you get my pink? I just pulled all these colors in. Oh, here it is. Okay, bubblegum pink. And we're gonna start with the toga first. Now I realize as we go along that my pieces are a little bit smaller than yours, so it might take me a little bit less time than you, but we will. We'll stay together. If you need more time, just let me know. So when I stipple, I like to, first off, the tools I'm going to use today are a wet palette. I like that the most for when I'm going to float. We're going to use this bubble palette that we talked about. We use that throughout the day. Not absolutely necessary, but helpful. And we need a few scrap pieces of paper. Some people use palette paper, or I just use cardstock's great, or just any kind of type paper to pounce on. I want you to take whatever you're going to use to stipple with. Where's my camera? Let me go over here a little bit. And I want you to dip just the, pull my palette in. I want you to dip just the bare tips into your paint. And this is especially important the first couple times that you load your brush. Where's my camera? So I don't have a whole lot of paint on there, as you can see, just kind of in the center. And I'm going to go to my piece of paper. This is kind of glary. I don't know if that helps. Anyway. And I want to start pouncing around on my paper until I can start to see some air through my paper. Now here, when you first touch it down, it's just kind of a blob of pink. And I'm going to get this a little bit closer. The more I move around on this piece of paper or on my palette paper, I'm starting to see some white air through it. Starting to see some holes through it. And that's what you want. You want the color to be softened, and you want there to be, you want to be able to see the paper underneath it. That's how you know when your brush is ready to go, when it looks about like that.
Sharon, I'm sorry, but can you spotlight your palette? Because it's on you instead of on your work surface. You know what I mean?
If you go up to the upper right in view and just click speaker, it should be okay.
Me?
That's what I did. I went up to the right corner of my screen and I clicked on view, and then I selected speaker, and it worked. It went back to her piece.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
If that helps you. I don't know if that works or not.
Okay. Is everybody good with that? Yes or no?
I think so.
Okay. Okay, so the point is you want to be able to see some of the white surface below like that, like this, as opposed to this or this. Now, I've talked so long and we stippled so long, I'm going to have to reload the brush. But, and this is the second time I'm loading it. And so it gets less and less, the brush gets full of more paint, and you have to be more careful to pounce out the bulk of your paint. I think I need to move my view to have you guys along the top. Okay, there we go. And when it starts to get light and airy, which I'm not happy with this yet, starting to, and you'll notice the amount of pressure, when it gets to look like that, I'm going to go to my toga, and we're just going to start applying some highlighting all around your toga. Now, at first when you start pouncing with your brush, lighten up a bit, keep your pressure pretty light, because you can always add to it and layer over it, but you can't take away without having to rebase, and none of us want to do that. So we're just going to go all over, not really going too close to the edge, but everywhere. This is going to take a minute. We're just going to fill in the center area of this toga with some stippling, which I think it would help me if we could put my Cupig right over there so I can look at him.
Don't do it.
Thank you.
Oh, mistress.
He calls himself my slave, and he's not, but he does do a lot to help me. I will have to say that. He also calls himself Mr. Sharon Cook, which he'll probably throw in here today. He says that a few times. And let me see. Okay. And I can kind of follow along as we go. Well, maybe you better. See if you-
I shall do so, mistress.
yeah, put it where my phone stand is. Okay. I hope our sound holds out. This kind of got me freaked out here. Okay. How's everybody coming?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. For being so demanding this morning.
I know they're just being very, very patient. And we are recording. Where's my record button? Yes, we are. Now, if you need to take a break or run to the restroom or you're dying of starvation, let me know. I will take a break a time or two midstream so that everybody's got that. And you might have to stand up and get some more water in your brush basin, whatever you need. I'm okay with that. It's kind of fun when we're this small because everybody can talk out loud. Okay, now I'm to the point where my brush is pretty dry. It's leaving a little bit of color, but not a whole ton. And I like it like that. So this is the point when I start to dry, what I call dry brush. So when I get to the point that it's like this, then you can very lightly start to swirl. And when that happens, because you have so little paint in your brush, this is where the softness happens, where you get some real smooth color, light color coming in between what you've already stippled. And this is how I get things to look kind of airy and light. This is a good way if you're adding mist, you know, if you're doing like a night scene with a glow around the moon or a glow around stars, you know, if you're using a lighter color. This is a good way to get something, that kind of effect also. But we're not done yet, but you can kind of see how it's starting to fill in a little bit more, and it actually has a tendency to smooth out some of the stippling if some part seems to be a little too intense or a little too dark or uneven. Scrub a little dry brush color in it, smooth that baby out. There is almost nothing that can't be fixed, which is a relief. Hallelujah for that. So there you go. All right, now I feel like this is pretty void of paint, so I'm gonna reload and just keep repeating until you like the intensity of the color, and then don't wash out your brush. Don't wash out your brush. I neglected to say, but I think you understand that using this technique with these brushes should be done with a dry brush. If there's water or moisture in this kind of brush, you will get kind of a muddy mess. So if you only have one or two of these brushes as we go along and paint today, that's okay, but make sure you squeeze out as much water as you can between some paper towels before you try this technique again, and just get that baby as dry as possible. Okay, so I'm not really going too close to the edge. I'm probably staying within about 1/3 of an inch from the edge. And but we're going to do some shading too over it, so there's not really a right or wrong. If you get closer to the edge, this is like a no worry, kind of no stress zone. And I always have to remind myself, but let your shoulders relax and let your arm do the work, and you'll come out of this class a lot less sore. Because we do have to do this kind of thing all over the whole pig too. It's not hard at all, but it just takes a little bit of patience. Okay, so now this is getting to look pretty light, and I'm kind of liking the way that the color looks. I'm kind of liking it's got, you know, the darker pink tones underneath that are showing through what I've stippled and dry brushed, and just kind of softening everything up with my little dry brush swirl thing. How's everybody else's looking? Are you happy with that?
Can you zoom your phone in so it's closer to your actual piece?
I don't know. Can I? Let me try.
You can
I
lower
don't know.
the entire arm.
Yeah, I think I have to lower the arm too.
I'll do that. You just
Or just raise your piece up closer to your phone so we can see the.
I used to have it down lower, but then it
Uh-oh. Bad idea.
If it gets in the view of the camera, that might be okay. Okay. So how's everybody's looking?
We may have lost the sound again. Sorry.
Can you hear me?
A little bit.
A little bit? Interesting. I think they're hearing me through that. That got moved away.
Okay, now it's
That's-
okay. Now
Now
it's
it's
okay.
louder.
Now it's louder?
Yes.
I think my sound might be coming through these, and when he moved that over, it moved. Can you see better and can you hear better?
Yeah, we can hear.
I'm gonna move these around my neck and just see if you can see if my, because this is plugged in. Does that make any difference in the sound?
Yeah, it's good.
It's better with it around my neck.
It looks cute.
I am so glad for supportive painters. You guys are awesome. Oh, I love it. How cute is that? Okay. All right. So what can you see? Can you see this better?
It's
Okay.
fine.
All right, great. All right. Now my piece is smaller, so I'm ready to move on, but how's everybody doing?
Ready?
Are you ready to, okay. So now you can see in our toga, look at our toga picture right there. See how those kind of segments or sections with sort of a dividing line? So this is why I didn't want you to wash out your brush yet. We're going to go in those sections right down the middle here and right down the middle here. And we're just going to get that area just slightly brighter. So reload your brush again and get it to the point that it's dry enough that you can do some dry scrubbing. Now, one thing I learned, I forgot to say, that will make the dry scrubbing technique a little bit faster is to get some paper towel because it's got a little bit of a rough edge. So when I stipple, I pretty much do it on here. When I dry brush, you can do it on here or here. Taking it to a paper towel will pull out a little bit faster some of the color and get your dry brushing ready to go faster. So within these two sections that we talked about, I'm coming in here and I'm just going to intensify the color by a little bit darker scrub. It may take more than one application to get it to pop a little bit, no problem. Don't want it streaky, but you just want to brighten your color there a little bit. So you can swirl or scrub down the center of those areas that are folded. And they will pop. Once we get the darker colors on there, they will show up even more. So we're not trying to achieve everything just with one color, but just want to intensify. Okay, it almost kind of looks like two stripes. In the camera, I can see that. Can you see that better? See how it's more intense right there? And it's starting to go a little more intense right here. Does that show up from your angle?
Yes.
Okay. So I do kind of like, let me put this up here where I can see. In my view, it looks like it's glaring, but I don't know for sure what you see. But the paper towel will pull it out a little bit faster. So scrubberoo. Okay. So you can see that this, even though that's still highlighted, this area here looks darker, like it's, and this is the brighter points, and that's what's going to pop out on our toga as we go along. Okay, so the wings, our wings here, we're still going to use this color. And so we're going to just stipple along the top here. Now, when you're on a cut edge like this is kind of fun to do, and it's kind of easy. And this brush has already been loaded with quite a bit of paint. It feels like it's dry, but when you start hitting like the corner edge, when you have a cut piece, you can, and you want to do the edge, you can actually go over the corner, which does part of the side and part of the top. But you can see that there is paint actually in there. It looks, and it paints pretty dry on here, but because the cut edge burrows down into the bristles, you can see that there's actually quite a bit of paint in there. So go along all the edges of your little wings, just kind of on the top part, and kind of do the side. And then I kind of like to just kind of pull off the edge. That's another little trick that I learned years ago when I dry brush. I just kind of also pull off the edge like that. So that part doesn't take too long because that area is pretty skinny. Here's your other little wing. Now I noticed the way in this setup, sometimes I paint close to my body and it goes off camera. Flag me down if I do that. Sometimes I don't always realize. So just call me out on it and let me know. I'm going to have to get a tiny bit more paint on here. Now, if you want to check your sides, I like a little bit of the color going on the sides, so go ahead and do that. Okay, so you can see that they've got some highlight going on there. And that's not the end all of it, but that's just a start. Let me put, I think I'd do better keeping these up here. Now on all these little tiny hearts, while we've got paint in our brush, go ahead and just get a little bit of color in those hearts too. The same way that we've done. I would do just the center and the top. Now, in the instructions, since the hearts are so little, I didn't have you do this on the tiny ones. But these are, so if you want to write down on your instructions, go ahead and do that. Because the hearts we're using here are a little bit bigger. And since they're so small, I mean, they're not as small as the originals. I'm off camera. You can kind of see that's not going to take very long to get just a touch, kind of in the middle and along the top there. Is anybody else using the same kind of brush that I am? No? Okay, that's fine. I like the size of it because it kind of covers bigger territory too. Anybody have any questions about the dry brushing technique? I take silence as good. Silence means no. Anybody want to sing to us? Who's got a good voice?
Not want me to sing to you.
We can play Cupig button.
No. No, thank you. I went through a period of time where I put music boxes in a lot of my things that I painted, which is fun. But my kids used to go around the room like at Halloween. Push, 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 all around the room. So you'd have all these wind up music boxes and push button music boxes playing different tunes all at the same time. And it did kind of make me nutso, but they thought it was hilarious. Okay, that didn't take very long. So there's our little hearts. And remember, these are going to be buried underneath some of your greenery. So they don't have to be a real great, perfectamundo experience. That's just to get the colors to blend in a little bit. Okay. So are we caught up? Is everybody on the same stage?
Almost.
Okay. Go ahead and get your baby pink out. That's our next color. We did not stipple around this Cupig because this little area is so skinny and narrow. So we don't worry about necessarily highlighting that. So I'll put that back up there. Give me a shout when you're ready. Is that a shout?
Ready?
Anytime.
Okay, baby pink. We're going to go over the areas that we just did with bubble gum. This is just going to make it lighter. My caution, you don't need to wash your brush, but remember now that this brush has quite a bit of bubble gum in it already. Okay, now we're going to load with baby pink, and you want to dry it out really well because, in fact, what I do when I switch colors, I usually load and dry it out more than once just to make sure that it's plenty dry and that the new color is going to show up. So this is my second load into baby pink. And I'm taking it to my paper towel and I'm getting it super dry. Now, look how airy that gets. This is how airy I want it to look before you start putting it on your project. I want it to look that airy, okay? Now, we thought we had brightened up these folds before with the other pink, but we're going to put in some of this lighter color along those stripes too. And I want you to use a light pressure so that the color goes on very softly and it's not necessarily even that discernible, but it is going to act as I can see it better on the camera. It just, steps that color right up. So that's kind of fun and easy and doesn't take very long. It's just a very light rub or a dry brush. And they almost look like stripes, which is fine because we do want them to look like they're popping out. As we put the shading in here, it'll make them look like they're rounded. Rounded is what I meant to say. And you can do a little bit here on the top of your wings. And I would just go on the tips. We don't need to do the whole thing that we did. Just on the very tips of your wings, just kind of scrub a little color in there. Just kind of brightens them right up. You can see that not everything I do is on camera. Okay, so that didn't take a whole long time. If you want to do your little tiny hearts, you can, not necessary. I'll let you do those after class when you go to assemble if you want to add more brightness. If they don't absolutely have to have that. That's just an idea for you. Okay, so the next color we're going to use is Algerian Crimson. And we're going to do some dry brushing, but we're not going to, and we're still working on the toga, but we're not going to do the same places where we did the other pinks. This is a dark paint and it's kind of a little bit transparent, which is fun when you go to float with it. So I want you to get a little bit on your palette, and I want you to use your paper towel and get this really, really dry. You can use your same brush if you want. In fact, it'd be easier if you did, you get a better blend. Your colors blend together when you use dirty brushes from one color and graduate into another. So I'm going to take it to my paper towel and I'm just going to get this puppy super, super dry. And remember, I said sometimes I like to, when I switch colors, I like to double dip it, but look how light and airy that's starting to get. That's kind of the look that we want, because there's already kind of a bit of, quite a bit of paint loaded in here. I'm going to do it one more time so I can get a little bit darker shade of the color. And I want that really, really dried out on your paper towel before you move on to your toga. So it should look very airy like that. And I want you to start going along the side edges of your toga. Remember how we kind of pulled paint and drug it off the edge? You're going to do this along the edge. It will show up better in just a minute and we'll float with it, and that will intensify it. And then when it gets to feel super dry, go ahead and scrub some of that color right in the very center of where that crease is, where that toga folds over. And let's get that area a little darkened, but we want it kind of blended out into the pink, which is why you want your brush to be really dry. See, now that's too dark. That would not look good on there. So make sure you scrub some of this color. Now, the more I load this brush, the darker color it gets, which is totally expected and normal. And so anytime I start out, I'm just going to go around the edges here and take out some of most of the color right on the edge of the wood. So go around your toga again. Just relax while you're doing this part. When it gets pretty light, scrub in there again. We don't have to try to get all the color on this first pass because we'll follow up with some floats. This is just a way to soften and blend in the color as we start. Stippling and dry brushing is very, very forgiving. And if you're having trouble with floating, I used to do this a lot when I first started to paint, and you wanted to float maybe around a long edge, and it's, floating is hard to get a really smooth transition on a long edge. So I would stipple the edges like this first and then float, and it sure did make your floats look a lot better. So just a little tip. If you're working with someone that's new, that might help them and give them a little courage and confidence. So there you go with that. Okay, so we can go ahead and rinse this brush out now. We will be stippling with some other colors of pink later, but this has got so much in it now and it's pretty dark. So go ahead and scrub that color out. Dry out your brush as much as you possibly can in case you need to use it a little longer. This is what I do. I just squeeze between paper towel. Just get as much water out as I can. I have several of these, so I might not need to use this one again, but if you do, just take out as much water as you need and as you can get, and then set that aside. Okay. Is everyone comfortable with floating? Yes? Okay. My preference in floating Totally up to you. I know that this is a class of experienced friends. I prefer to use an angular brush, but not everyone enjoys those. So use whatever you like the most. And we're still on the color of Algerian Crimson. I think I'm going to put a little more on the palette here. And we're going to start floating around our edges of our toga. And we're going to float down the center of this area too on that wiggly line. And that's where we're going to start to get our crease. This is my most favorite. This one. So I use a wet palette if any of you are curious about that and don't know what that is. Do I need to explain wet palettes to anyone? No? Okay. So go ahead and get your float all ready to go then on your wet palette. And we're going to take this Algerian Crimson and we're just going to float to start all the way around the edge. And you can see how the dry brushing underneath kind of helps that blend and flow a little bit smoother. So this will take a minute to go all the way around your edge. I'm not sure what you're seeing in the camera, but I'm getting glare in my view. Can you see it okay?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Now another trick, when you're doing a long edge, this doesn't always work. If you get too much water, you toast, is to kind of pre-wet the area. I will not do that here because I've already started, but your toga is pretty long. So when it comes time to do this reverse float in the center, which we're going to do in a minute, you may want to consider pre-wetting the area to get your float to flow smoother in longer strokes. I'll show you in just a minute. Okay. How's everybody coming? Now we're going to have to wait for this to dry before we do our ends, which is okay. Okay, so on the center float, it's kind of a wiggly line. You don't have to necessarily do your floats wiggly because when you line it, you can indicate with your liner brush that there are some wrinkles and wiggles in there, but you're certainly welcome to if you'd like. Now, if you decide to pre-wet your wood so that your float will go longer, dry out your brush and with clean water. Don't have any paint in it, and just stripe it along there. Now, if you do it too wet, your float will not work well. So you just want a little bit of water if you're going to do that. And I want you to just, can't really see my lines. I want you to just to float along here, along that center. There's some of my wiggles there. Now, while it's still wet, because this is not a beautiful float, I'm going to go back in and kind of reverse back over it and smooth that out a little bit. And just try to get that as smooth looking as possible. We can repeat that again, which we will in just a minute. And get some of that dark color in there. When it dries, we'll probably go over it again until we like the way it looks. So this is a non-stress moment. Okay. And my paint's not drying as fast as it usually does. Is it snowing? No, it's not. Okay, then go to the other side, flip it over, and right against your other float, you're going to come along with this one, and you're going to meet And you're going to just fill it in on this side. Now, this side I did not pre-wet. And so my float doesn't last as long. And when it's not pre-wet, the floated color actually goes on a little darker, which is okay. It's just whatever you'd like. So let me just pull that in. Now, sometimes where your float meets the previous float, they don't always go smoothly. So flip it over if you don't like the way it looks where they meet, and float it again where they meet until the two kind of join. If I'm in camera, and you get a look that you like. Okay, don't worry if your wiggles don't exactly match the wiggles on the pattern, because like I said, that part is emphasized with your lining. Making sure I'm in the camera. So flip it over and take a look at your other side and make sure you like the way that they meet together, and smooth out anything that you don't like. You can always go over it again with a second coat until it looks right to your eye. And when it dries, we can go over it again and make it a little whiter. Okay, this color you can kind of tell when it dries a little lighter than it looks when it's dark. And I think I mentioned that this is a somewhat transparent color, which makes it fun to use when you're floating. You can't always tell for sure about the intensity till it dries, because it dries lighter than it looks. So I'm going over, for that reason, I'm going over my edges of my wood again, just with a quick and kind of thin, meaning watery float. I just want that slightly more intense. Back again on the other side. So it feels like we take a long time on this toga, which it does have some detail, but trust me, the whole class will not be only on this toga. Okay, so if you have a blow dryer there, it's okay to go ahead and pull it out. And I might hit mine with a blow dryer. Hope you're okay with that. Just to speed things up, if it were plugged in. Oh, goodness, I'm just having like challenges of the year today. I guess we're not going to blow dry. Okay, so onto your wings. Let's set this aside and let that dry a little bit so that we can go back and float. Okay, go to your wings now. And we've still got Algerian crimson. And we're going to float. We're going to float on here around these pink hearts. I've got to move this. I'm trying to keep things in the camera. And it can be a pretty thin float, pretty skinny. We don't need a whole lot of wide color, but you just want to, now, sometimes getting in a point next to the heart is hard, and sometimes you kind of overshot your bounds. So this is what I like to use. I call my paint eraser. If you have something that's gone beyond the mark, take a Q-tip, dip it in water, roll it across your paper towel, and now it just becomes a damp Q-tip, and you can use it to erase what you don't like. Your paint eraser, my favorite tool, and very inexpensive. I can't live without them. Can't remember who taught us that tip, but one of the best things. I've got too much water in my brush here, and I can see that as I go along. So on the bottom here, I never really like floats when they come to just a square, so I'm going to use my pink eraser and taper that point off so it's not quite so harsh. And actually, that's going to be glued under the body. It won't really show, so it's not that big a deal, but that's just kind of my OCD side coming out a little bit. And I'll probably go over this again because I probably like it a little bit darker, but that's kind of what we're after. I've only gone around one side. I haven't done the other side yet. Remind me to keep on camera. So we're going to do that. So it's pretty dark. Now we're also, I'm going to let those dry. On our little Cupig heart, if you can get it skinny enough, I want you to shade some of this right up next to that pink heart too, but it needs to be pretty skinny float. I don't have very much on my brush. It's loaded very thinly. And we'll just go around here. Okay, I might go over that again after it dries. I haven't done it around the top of it because I want a little bit more emphasis. Okay, I'm going to finish going around the other side of my wings, the heart around my wings, and then we'll go back to our toga. We'll get some more shading on our toga. Okay, after this dries, I'm going to talk to you about filling in that area in between where they come together in a point. But we have to wait for it to dry first before we kind of fill it in. How's everything looking? Okay?
Good.
Okay, good. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry. One thing that I like to do is whenever I have two floats that meet, let me show you on the white paper. Let me get some more paint on here. I never really like harsh edges. So in the case of this heart, we're floating around here like that. And then we're floating around here like that, although that's not a very good float. And we've got this V area right here in the middle. and it comes to a point. I like to always go back in and soften in that V so that it doesn't look like, you see this same thing when you do go around a box or come to a square edge. You'll have this with this, you know, and things in real life just don't really shadow like that. They don't really have like a square shadow. So when you have something like that, go back and fill it in like that and make that rounded out a little bit. Same thing with going in this little point of your heart. Go in and round out that little V. So just a little tip, but it just makes it look a little more natural. So I like to just go in and pull the paint up a little bit in that V. Okay, how's everybody coming? Have you gone around all your wings? Floated around the pink heart of your wings? Yes? No? Yes?
Yep.
Okay. I just need to do a little bit around my Cupig heart here, just a little tiny, and then we can go back to the toga. This doesn't even really show that much, so it's not that critical. But it just ties everything in together, that they have the same colors. They look like they belong to the family and look alike. Okay, I'll set that aside. Okay, if you've gone all the way around the wings, that's fine. Now your wings are going to be glued behind your Cupid about at the point where it starts to curve in. And the reason why it's more bulbous on the end actually is to give you more gluing space. So when you are wondering what's going to show when you assemble, it's pretty much from there on out, okay, from where it bends in upward, like about that. So you want to keep that in mind as you do your shading in different elements about what's going to be most important that shows. Okay, so back to our toga. We did our center stripe and a reverse float on both sides, and we did the sides and sides here. Now we're going to do the side. Look at that. We're going to do the sides around here, and we want to take a little special note. There's a little bit of negative space in here, and that is, let me see if that's something I can point with. Hold on. I'll just use this pencil like a pointer. So in the pattern, right where the fold comes into play, there's a little bit of a negative space right there. Okay, so that's going to be filled in with black. And same thing over here. A little bit negative space right there and a little bit negative space right there. Although those don't show as much. And there's a little bit of negative space right here. So when we shade our sides, don't just shade around here, but shade down here, around here, shade next to the negative spaces so that when the black goes on, it doesn't cover up all of our shading. Let me show you what I mean if you can see it. So I'm coming around here and I'm going to shade around that negative space and up around here. And there's another negative space and up around there. Now that's not a very pretty float yet, but can you see what I mean? That way, when we fill that in with black, the shading isn't obscured by the black color. We might fill it in with zinc. I can't remember what color we fill it in, but we definitely fill it in with a darker color. And then do the same thing over here. There's going to be tiny negative spaces by the folds. And we'll take a break in about 10 minutes. So anybody can get more water, run to the restroom, whatever you need to do. Now, here's a case where we want to make sure that this point is smooth. It's kind of opposite of what I talked before, but you don't want a point and a point. So if it looks too harsh, make sure you soften that up a little bit and kind of bend it around a little bit. Now this wasn't a super pretty float because I was trying to show you quickly, so I need to go over and catch that up a little bit. And then onto this side. A little bit of a negative space right there. I'm off camera. A little bit of negative space right there. Even that little V, which will be filled in. And I like to use this color a couple times just to make sure it gets intense enough for my liking. Okay, on this pattern, on my wing, there's one more float in here that we didn't do the first time, but it's not a double float. Well, I think it is. So right here where we made this negative space, where we came in on this one, I want you to float a little bit along here in a wiggly line, but you only need to go in maybe 3 or 4 inches at the most. We're not going all the way across. We're just going to start here on the edge, and we're just going to float underneath that wrinkle, and we're going to taper it off. Now, if you're not comfortable with the way your paint looks tapered off, to taper it off, I just simply lift it up as I go. Take your Q-tip and gently wipe it till it comes to a point. You want that to fade away. Okay. Then go up above it, where that wrinkle is, and go ahead and match it to make a reverse float. And as you get close to the end, you can make this as wiggly as you want. Taper it off. It doesn't have to be straight because the fabric doesn't wrinkle straight. It can be wavy. And I'm going to go again along the bottom. I think the bottom line is more important to be dark than the top line there. Okay, so when this dries, which it's not right now, and so I can't repeat it. When it dries well enough, I'm going to go ahead and repeat the float shading right here up until that dry point. I'm going to again float along the bottom there to make that a little more intense. So that's kind of what you're after, right there. And then the same thing applies to this little area right up here. There's going to be another little float next to that negative space right there. Only this one's only small. It's only maybe 1.5 inches long, maybe a couple inches long. Not as wide as the other one because it's a smaller space, but so just bring that in and kind of float that wrinkle in, taper it off. See, I don't love that taper, so I'm gonna correct it with my pink eraser and flip it over and go back in and tuck in that wrinkle. And if you need to, taper it off to a point. Okay, this is still wet. I think I need to check the reset on my blow dryer. Give me just a second.
I seem to have lost the sound again. Can you hear me, Sharon? Can't hear you. We can't hear you. There's no sound, Sharon.
Sharon? Sharon? I thought I could hear her.
I think it was someone else.
Oh, okay. She
I
must
thought
not be
I-
able,
Yeah, I thought at first it was her too, but then I realized it was someone else rinsing out their brush or something.
because I
must-
think it's only you and me that aren't on mute.
Would that make a difference if we muted ourselves? Would it make a difference for her? It shouldn't, but
I don't think so.
it must
I
be
don't think she must not be able to hear us either.
no, she must be really frustrated.
Oh, I would be.
Can you imagine how all the teachers across America feel right now?
Oh,
It's a humbling thing for everybody.
yes.
She should probably just bail and
Maybe take a break and then come back in. But it's like her sound keeps going in and out. Can you hear us? She can hear us.
we can't hear you at all, Sharon.